And so we have a really, really dope panel that I want to read their bios. So first up, we're gonna have Gabrielle Deculus join us. Thank you so much. And so I've known Gabby. Welcome to the stage. Thank you, thank you. So I've known Gabby about 10 years now. I introduced our common friend, technologist out of Houston. Gabby is a dope entrepreneur and operating in the space of culture and technology. I'll read her bio here. So she's a creative marketing strategist and social entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience. She is originally from New Orleans area and works between here and Cape Town. She's a founder of St. Josephine Consultants, and as well as Business Rules for Women and the NOLA Zydeco Festival. So welcome, Gabby, to the stage. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to bring Uchi to the stage, and I'm sure this guy doesn't need any introduction here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so Uchi is a developer who loves building things, especially at hackathons. So currently he is the Director of Developer Relations at Coil, where he is taking Coil's strategy for developer engagement globally and building a community around web monetization, Interledger, and Coil's products globally. He's also the founder and CEO of Chi Money, a platform that aims to unlock the potential of money for everyone in the world. Chi Money enables the exchange of value between multiple types like crypto to mobile money, airtime to gift cards, banks to mobile money, and so much money empower players for Google, Microsoft, and others. So Uchi, welcome to the stage. And thank you. I'm super excited about this panel. And then last but not least, I want to bring our CTO, Snake Nation CTO, Tawanda Brandon, to the stage. Tawanda is a super dope brother. We met in Cape Town at Rise, where we also met Adrian, which is how we got how we've been like following you guys for so long. He's a software engineer and also a tech founder with a background in corporate IT, banking, and IoT. Currently, he's building bridges towards a more inclusive financial economy across Africa. And so welcome Tawanda to the stage. Thank you so much. So this format's a little different. What we're gonna do basically is have the panelists respond to different data points that we're gonna use the screen to share, right? And so we'll basically say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? It's really more of a free-flowing conversation. So I know we got about an hour, so hopefully we enjoy the ride a bit. So why media and monetization? We can kind of go here. Here's this massive explosion. So what we talk about here real quick is what happened after COVID. And so, of course, COVID hits, everyone's locked in, the amount of content that gets consumed goes through the roof. And so just really interested to hear your guys' input on like how you saw it impact in culture, how you saw it impact in tech, and just how you've seen this sort of online consumption impact and touch your worlds. So we'll start with Gabby.
Okay. Yeah, actually when COVID happened, where I was sitting was producing a conference. And I immediately decided to pivot and keep the conference, and we fought through COVID. I actually had COVID when we produced the virtual conference. Probably within 2 weeks of us being in lockdown, we just did it. And from that point moving forward, I realized like what we had done. And that, everyone was eager, hungry, and wanted, to be entertained, to be engaged, and to be connected because we didn't know what was to come. And so where I sit as a creative marketer, outside of creating, the Business Rules for Women conference and keeping our community engaged, I found myself helping other companies that saw that same opportunity and thought that that was important. And so from where I sit, the things that I had in my back pocket for years that weren't necessarily needed just yet, COVID gave me an opportunity to really jump into tech, show people what I can do, and show them that they can continue to push through and do the things that they want to do as well. So on the consumer side, they're building a better community. On the creative and business side, we're in demand.
Yeah, dope.
Yeah, thanks. So for me, when COVID hit, we were planning the Africa Hacks Hackathon, and also we had to pause that, and we kind of said, how can we support the community? So we went back and reached out to everyone in the community. So Africa Acts is a community of 10,000 people based out of multiple African countries. So I reached out to them and said, how can we support you? Because lots of people have lost their jobs. Some of them were home from school. And Africa has committed some funding to basically distribute to the community. And the interesting thing that happened was that even other community members decided to also match the funds that were contributing. But the highlight of it all was that we were inspired to build a platform to bring everyone together. So this platform, the goal was to build something that allowed members of the community to earn, to learn, and to play. So those are the three things that we work towards, and that's how the Start by Africa Acts platform was launched. And as part of all of this, even after COVID, this platform also is used to host hackathons. So last month, we just hosted a hackathon in partnership with the Office of the Vice President of Nigeria and some financial institutions in Nigeria. And that's the hackathon that the ILF was part of. So, I mean, COVID, I think, was an inspiration for us to continue to support youth on the continent. And I'm really inspired by what this nation is doing. And I truly believe that it can unlock lots of opportunities for the continent and beyond.
Give thanks. Give thanks. Mr. Brandon.
All right. I think from my end, what COVID really did for a lot of places in Africa was, kind of catapulted us into the future of where the rest of the world was, and as far as technology and tools and digital tools and how we use them. And what I mean is, for the first time, we were all locked up. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go to work. And the work still needed to get done. Schoolwork still needed to get done. And for the first time in a very long time, or at least in some areas for the very, very first time, we saw institutions and governments getting involved, alleviating some of these barriers to entry that had always existed, that they quite frankly didn't care about. And a good example is we always talk about mobile data and how mobile data is a barrier to entry to just the internet in general. During COVID, we saw universities and educational institutions and government involved buying data for students who couldn't go to school anymore so that they could do their lectures online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some of that stayed on, some of the changes, some of the universities that we're also working on with some of the programs we're doing. Some of the students hadn't gone back to campus until earlier this year. So for the first time, we also saw a lot of that happening, and it hasn't gone away. That online element, people understanding that you can actually just get on a call with someone and actually conduct business and not ever need to meet with them. We also saw just the rise of the use of online platforms by creatives just as a way to make money now. You can do live shows, you can do any of the sort of appearances that you could make money from. And now they were kind of leading, they were at the forefront of pushing everyone else onto this is the new normal, and just the impact that this move or that this gradual change into this increased utilization of these digital tools has also come with the benefits that they bring, and that I believe they've managed to turn the heads of the governments, the slow-moving big dinosaur corporates, into where we kind of need to be, especially for companies like us trying to build these tools that are serving the same people. That conversation has been very easy for us, trying to explain to someone that they should probably get, a video on demand subscription. They did that during COVID. You had the whole day, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't do anything. And we started to see a lot more of this becoming normalized, as opposed to what people were used to. A lot of utilization of social media, not only from just the social side of things, but from the dissemination of information. So all of the information that was around what's happening with COVID, what's happening with you know, like the laws that were just changing left, right, and center. We started to see more formalization, or some of the organizations that used to be, you know, in person moving online, and they've stayed there ever since. Yeah, and
it reminds me of I don't know if anybody follows D Nice here, DJ D Nice, right? But so D Nice started what was it, Club COVID, right? So Club COVID. So Club COVID was D Nice, you know, streaming his set. So D Nice is a famous hip hop DJ, basically. Nowhere near as famous as he is now, though, and he got that love from everything that was happening in COVID. So of course, everybody's locked up, and you know he starts to spin, and you know he's a very high-paid DJ, so he's spinning for hours, hours and hours and hours. Next thing you know, Michelle Obama's in his room. Everybody's in his room. I mean, you're talking 500,000 people following a DJ set online. And, you know, he had to have a tip jar, you know? And this is where I think when we talk about like the power of web monetization and culture, and I think, you know, making sure that the tools are ready to meet that level of demand, right? Because, you know, that, you know, had, you know, web monetization been ready then he would have been basically able to like capture that value, right? But because because the tech is still in development, you know, you have people sort of doing ad hoc, like it's not built into IG. And so he says, cool, well, go here to do a separate, maybe I'm using Patreon, I'm using something else. And so you see creators constantly navigating and trying to figure out, like, how do I turn this following into income, which is why they're perfect candidates for web monetization. So let's shift gears a bit. We're gonna talk a bit about two trends: subscription video on demand, right? And this is the growth. So this is a projection on the players on the continent right now, right? And so you'll see everybody from like smaller players all grouped under others, to Showmax down to Disney Plus, which looks like it's gonna eat, and then Netflix, right? And so these are all new players to the continent. Obviously some are bigger than others, some are homegrown, but you know, when you combine the subscription video on demand with the demand as well for online video, you can see that there's gonna need to be an uptick in content creation. So I'm just curious, just from the standpoint of your different sectors, like how you're seeing these sort of trends impact the work that you do. As you see, this is a bit of a jump ball for everybody. So I'm just curious, like, so you got online video on demand, you have subscription video on demand, you have this massive demand for content that started in COVID. Like, how are you guys seeing this play out in culture and marketing and then across the tech space? So anybody wants to raise their hand on that one to go first? Yeah.
It's heavy in my world. It's so heavy. I mean, if I can be transparent, I'm here at this conference, but the demand for content creation, online streaming, and in-person experiences, as you can see, is at an all-time high. And so that's what I meant by my first comment, is that it went from the intensity and importance of focusing on in-person experiences to going online and actually creating that content, the subscription piece attached to it that all content creators and brands should have. And it's like, it's just a no-brainer. If you're not doing it, it's time to start doing it, because people have budgets for it, they're ready to spend their coin. And that's how we build trust as brands too. Now we have to go where the people are, and we have to stay connected to them. Community now, I think, matters more than ever before, and that includes, of course, online. So, you know, I just think that it's a big thing. It's a big part of my work. Went from mostly in-person production to, like I said, being able to do more tech-centered production, which is something that I've always really wanted to do. So I think that it's a cool way for creatives to harness their skills, learn more things, and then become attractive to not just, you know, your own community, but to other people who want to build communities too. You can help them do that.
Copy. Now, but before you leave this point, something just occurred. So how many followers does Business Rule for Women have?
We have probably about 230-ish thousand.
Okay. And then, so what do you think about, because there's sort of like your community side of 200,000 plus followers that you have to service as a creator.
Absolutely.
Then of course there's, you know, your business side where you're doing more B2B.
Yeah, there's different
so,
elements that I look at this from.
So
you know.
maybe put on your business rules for women hat right now and just kind of say like, you know, I'd love to understand like what are the things that you're looking at to monetize your following, for example.
You know, the more that I sat in the sessions throughout this summit, I've been thinking about you know, some ideas that I had a while back in the capacity I didn't have back then that we may have more of now. I was speaking to Tawanda about this, is that, you know, any community in general, but especially the community of women in business or women handling business, we need payment platforms too, and we want to support payment platforms that are created by women and or have an interest that goes back into the things that women want and care about, and then those who support us. And so I think that, you know, right now I'm actually thinking and figuring that piece out. I've actually had business rules for women on ICE so I can figure out what is our next step, what is our best next step. And it has everything to do with web monetization, but also processing, invoicing, and transferring money. You know, I feel like if we launch something like that, or when we launch something like that, really, it's going to be huge. So I'm thinking about the opportunities from our community more now than ever in regards to not just monetizing for myself, but helping them monetize through our platform.
Copy. Cool. No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Uchi, you're next on the hot seat here. I know this is near and dear to Coil's heart in terms of online video, so just would love to hear, like, you know, how you guys are seeing the future and, you know, when you see this data, what does it make you think about?
Yeah, so when I see this data, I think about the change that happened before we started seeing more adoption to online video, right? So when I look at the developer community, for example, previously, most of the events needed to be in person, but now we're forced, I guess it's not forced, we're encouraged to mostly, even with in-person events where like there's always going to be an online video component, right? And we're starting to see lots of developer training move from just a month-long or 2-month-long training to a community-based training program where there's a community online and there is also online videos as part of this community. So when you're learning with a community, and as part of that, they provide some incentives to interact with others that you're learning from. So, and like what you said, the opportunity to promote a business by using online video and partnering with platforms like Women in Business, I think is really huge for all kinds of businesses, right? There's adoption, massive adoption or massive growth in online video, and I think that for everyone, just being able to have or bring our products and services where people are, it's massive. I think the platform that you've built is really impressive and a big opportunity for, I mean, most of the companies that are here to work with women in business. So.
Cool. Thank you. Mr. Brandon.
Yeah, so I think specifically from what I see, you had another slide up with
I don't know how to go backwards. How do I go
online
backwards?
video.
The red one? Boom.
Perfect.
Tech support. Thank you.
So, I mean, look, the previous slide, it was clearly showing the growth of online video in general, so like SVOD. And what I like about this particular slide that we're looking at, the projections, like what it's going to look like over the next couple of years, that others section, is, I mean, from a Snake Nation perspective, with our platform, that's kind of like where I'm imagining us being categorized as, because this other section has been in existence since 2019 there, and we can see that in 2025, the share that it has over, just all of the subscribers that are going to be subscribed to video on demand, bit like Netflix, et cetera, is massive. Now, this presents an opportunity for like some really meaningful work, from, you know, specifically the complexities surrounding, you know, the payments side of things. So when you look at we're looking at the stats between I think it was Spotify, Apple Music, for audio on demand. And I think in total in Africa, they had just
Under a million.
under a million monthly active subscribers. And that's like all three of them put together. And we found that to be very surprising. And a lot of it isn't necessarily that the subscription itself is expensive. I think a whole lot more people than just a million, you know, a little under a million in Africa, you know, there's billions of people there, can afford, you know, a $9 Netflix subscription a month, considering the, you know, the stats clearly show that this is something they're looking at. Well, why they are not doing that is kind of like, you know, where this opportunity I'm talking about comes in. So how can we make it easier for, you know, people to buy these credits or, you know, to make these subscriptions, if they are unbanked or if they are on mobile money or, you know, if they're actually just holding cash. Or, you know, how also, right, say, you know, we've given you this platform, well, how do we also ensure or make sure that you actually have access to the said platform? Data will always be like, you know, a very big barrier to entry if you're trying to target anyone who is, you know, coming from 90%, like 99% of the countries in Africa. So this person is thinking, okay, I can pay $9 for Netflix, and I will be able to watch, you know, as much content as I want 24/7. But do I have the $25 or the $30 in data that I have to pay for this? Right.
Exactly.
And you know, it's like and even from our end, we've kind of thought about different workarounds. I mean, just from a customer acquisition perspective, when you think about it and say, okay, well, how much would it actually cost as a tech platform to zero rate your platform, as in to do reverse billing, right? So users can have the network, say they do have network coverage. How can you make it that they shouldn't need to pay their telco, they shouldn't need to buy data for them to access your service? Something that we've seen, like in South Africa, all of the banks have zero-rated apps. So, you know, you can top up your data.
Facebook as well.
Yeah, Facebook was doing the same thing, right? Yeah. So
Meta, sorry.
Meta. So like the opportunity, right, that it kind of like presents is, you know, like, from when you're thinking, how do we get this, or how are these people going to jump onto these platforms? How are we going to meet those stats? I actually see that with the work that we are doing and the opportunity and the problem that we can actually solve for, will blow, you know, those stats, the numbers that we're looking at right now, you know, at least twofold. And, you know, it's a question of how much data can you buy with $1 million? And what does that translate to? You know, if you remove that need, I want to use your platform, I want to pay, you know, I want to come and watch your video. This is a creator, right, in Africa, and you're speaking to the people you're supposed to be making this content for. Your fans actually want to support you, they want to pay, they want to buy whatever you are selling, but some of the costs that associate what you are selling makes what you're selling way more expensive than it actually is, or what it's supposed to cost. And not to, you know, beat on this for too long, another layer of it is just when you talk about just cultural export in general, over 95% of cultural exports right now are coming from developed countries. And when you talk about Netflix and, you know, people in Africa joining up Netflix, you know, when I'm in South Africa and I'm watching Netflix, how much content on Netflix that I'm watching is actually coming from South Africa or Ghana or, you know, Tanzania or any of these places we're talking about. And I mean, it's very important to look at it from that perspective, because these trillions of dollars annually So what does that look, when we move that 5% that is being shared across, most of these developing nations to 10%? This is a country where we've already had, they have a lot of 90%, or over 90%. There's a stat I just had in the previous talks. I think it was about 90% of the people in Africa are living under $8 a day. Consume less than $8 a day. And when you think about how much you need to make for it to be considered employment in an environment like that, it's the kind of numbers that you would get by just moving the needle a little bit. I have friends that pay $20, $30, for their rent. There's college students, right? But this is unheard of. It's unheard of in South Africa. It's unheard of, in most of the places that I would go to. But you go to Zimbabwe, you go to a lot of the places that we've been doing work in. $50 is enough for someone to get a roof over their head for the whole month. Maybe another $50 for you to get your groceries. And all I'm trying to say is $200 a month, $250 a month is considered employment in a lot of these areas. And when we talk about just SVOD and the creators getting a share of all of this revenue that is going to come from this opportunity, it is going to go a very long way in some of these marginalized communities that we're doing work in.
And I think it's a great point around the economics. And so oftentimes we hear, criticism of oh, well, who cares about the little bit of money you're going to make on web monetization? Well, shit. Yeah. When you look at the amount of minutes that are going to be consumed, for instance, and then the impact value of the dollar right now, for instance. So when we were employing these young people in Burkina Faso, we were paying them $200 a month, and they worked for us full time. They were making more than their parents, right? To put it in perspective. So, the point is, it's better to be a working creator probably than anything else. And even when you talk, I think there was this whole TikTok thing that came out. It was on 60 Minutes recently, right? Where we're the Chinese version of TikTok is different than the American version of TikTok, right? And when you ask a Chinese, they ask Chinese kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And number one answer was an astronaut. And then in America, the number one answer is an influencer, right? And so, which is scary.
Which is scary because they are filtering what their children consume, and they're letting the rest of the world consume whatever comes their way in the algorithm, and it.
Yeah.
I sent you that article.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Because he has a brilliant daughter, and
Yeah.
I'm just we talk about these different apps and the things that she's using and things like that, and I immediately thought about Maya, and thought about just her generation of, I don't want to go too deep here, I was gonna say, indoctrination, but anyway, word.
Yeah, no, so I kind of have a different reaction. So I look at that and say, all right, well, what are the chances of someone becoming an astronaut? They're probably about as high as becoming a pro athlete or as high as becoming an influencer, right? Everyone thinks they're gonna, right? But what's interesting about what's being built here is the application is shit that can actually be a job in a way that it's not now, right? So when someone says, hey, I want to be an influencer, everyone thinks you're full of it until you show up with a check. And it's what you hear artists talk about all the time. No one believed in me till I bought a house for my mom, or nobody believed in me till and so what I found interesting in the early days of developing Snake Nation was, the work that was happening at Steam It. And what I really thought interesting about what Steam It was doing was that they were saying, hey, you can go to YouTube right now and be I paid my rent with Steam It, was one of the videos I saw, right? And so when I'm we had just raised money, so I was just had all this time, I used to be at Rise just going deep on is this real, is this viable, and I think the answer, it is viable. Because basically, brands, I spent a long time working in brands, and so with brands, I ran an agency for 15 years. Brands don't care where their content comes from. All they care is that it moves the needle, right? So the ability for there to be more connective tissue between the business world and the creator, to me, that's the promise that web monetization delivers on. Because ultimately, if there are easy ways for brands to say, hey, here's $100,000, make sure this gets to everybody whose video engages, right now, that's what Google is doing for them. If you think about it, right? And there's a whole other sidebar around like fraud in web advertising. That's super interesting. We would get into that at the W3C. So anyway, we're going to keep rolling along this. Is this helpful? Like, are y'all like this format? Is this cool? Okay, cool. Yeah, we're just bouncing off of data up in here. All right, cool. So Africa, why Africa, right? And so I think, you know, you hear like a lot of things about Africa. Africa's the future. Africa's got the youngest, you know, continent, you know, on Earth, and is for a lot of people the next frontier of growth. I think for a lot of people that read this, they immediately think, it's 1 billion new buyers. And I think what's interesting that we should be thinking about is like, well, how do we make them producers? Because producers are going to be ultimately buyers as well, right? Like, you know, so how do we make sure that we can change that poverty narrative and take advantage of business conditions that are at play, right? And so my job is to kind of understand what's being built, but then figure out like, well, how does this make money? And how is this useful to the general public? And so here's an interesting one. So I don't know if everybody's keeping up with what's happening with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, but you know, this is the setting, right? This is the environment. So Africa is going to one market, and they're also going into, there's a big massive movement afoot called Smart Africa to go to one single digital market, right? And so you have, you know, barriers to entry being blown away sort of internally. So imagine like Africa's version of the euro likely to come. But then you also have, you know, an acknowledgement and no, you know, marriage to legacy systems in a lot of these places that says, hey, how do we get to one single digital market? And so Tawanda touched on this a bit before. So this is kind of the nut to crack I think we should want to dive into here. So 95% of cultural exports come from developed countries. And then 0.05% comes from the developing countries, right? And so, you know, that gap means that you have, you know, people that are largely consumers and not producers, right? So I'm gonna park it here for a sec and then go back to the panel. Super interesting to see like your thoughts on the role that web monetization can play, and government, ideas on policy and all that kind of stuff, around shifting these numbers. Because Tawanda, to your note, imagine if you can get that number up by a couple of percentage points. As we saw, these are massive numbers, so you know, moving something 2 or 3% can actually be millions of jobs, right? And, you know, billions of dollars, because it's a massive economy. So just super curious on the role that you think web monetization can play in shifting this current reality. So I'll take it back to the panel. Jump ball, who's on it?
I can go for it.
All right, cool.
So web monetization, and I would say, I'll speak on Interledger in general. I think it has a lot of potential for the continent, right? Because when we look at the population, the youth population is really large. And not just large, but also very ambitious. And I don't want to use hungry. Ambitious and willing and full of vigor and will to get stuff done, right? There's this population of youth. They want to work. They are smart. And also, they could do a lot with like less. So I think for Interledger and for the payment space in general, an opportunity I see is some of the resources in the space could be used to harness some of those talents, right? I believe that 10% of investment in the space could achieve like 80% of impact compared to like, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of resources put in Africa has the potential to accomplish what 80% of resources put in other parts of the world, or in North America specifically, could accomplish, just because of the youth, mostly the talent there. So I think there's an opportunity to explore programs that are targeted towards providing opportunities for maybe tech talent, developers, content creators on the continent to start exploring use cases that help to unlock utility for Interledger, right? Because when we look at the payment space in general, Web3, crypto, and the rest of them, there are lots of value that are being created. But the challenge that we're seeing is that this value don't mean much in real life, right? So you might have $10,000 in some token, but when you think about it from the perspective of what does this mean in creating value for maybe paying bills or paying tuition or paying healthcare bills and stuff like that, people are not able to use those funds to basically make their lives better. So I think for Interledger specifically, something that should be explored is how can some of the resources that are available be targeted towards programs that support the growth of youth and programs that help youth on the continent to start building with Interledger, to start creating content focused on Interledger, and to start playing with Interledger. And I mean, this applies to a lot of ecosystems, and definitely Snake Nation is the community to work with to make this happen.
Give thanks.
And yeah,
that's an unpaid endorsement.
So Snake, yeah.
But you touched upon something that I thought was really interesting, because we were just chatting about, like, well, how do you help drive adoption of Interledger, right? Like, and so, you just touched upon video. So I'm just curious around, what you see as implications for, like, online learning, for example. Like, how do you see that kind of playing out in terms of, like, the Interledger adoption and so forth? Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
That was a question for you.
Okay, for me.
Yeah. That was back.
Follow-up for you, right?
That was a follow-up for you.
Okay, for sure, yeah, I can answer that. So, like what Tawanda mentioned earlier, that in some parts of the continent, data, which is like Wi-Fi and internet data that, most of us, we have it on our phone. We don't really worry about the amount of megabytes or gigabytes that we spend. It's just there, it's always there on our phone. We can watch as many YouTube videos as we want to watch. We can watch Netflix on our phones without it being a concern. But for some parts of Africa or some countries in Africa, that's a big challenge, right? So you're paying for each megabyte that you spend. So like Tamara mentioned, even if you've paid for the Netflix subscription, you are limited by the amount of data that you can afford. So I think to help with the adoption of Interledger, something specific that can be explored is the model that Facebook or Meta did. So what they basically did was that they made it free to browse facebook.com in partnership with all of the mobile networks. So if you have the SIM card, or if your phone is from a mobile network, when you open facebook.com, it's free. It's paid by the company. So I think there's an opportunity there to maybe partner with existing learning platforms that are focused on the continent. I think Snake Nation is building something like that, like an existing learning platform, then working with maybe funding, providing funding to pay for data in partnership with the mobile network, so that any content that is Interledger specific, or any content that is Interledger specific basically is free, so they don't have to pay for data. And because that's like a very, very big problem, right? And for us here, it's not an issue for us, but it's definitely like an issue, and I think it's a big opportunity that we can explore. Lots of companies, Meta, Facebook thought about it and it worked a lot. And that's why you see, so I think, I think it's a big opportunity. That's all I'm gonna say,
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because, when you talk about just some of the challenges on on the continent at large, what's interesting to me about the school environment is they have Wi-Fi. Let's just start there. They've got infrastructure, right? And so, the ability for, students to tap in, I think is big. But what you're seeing, we saw Microsoft do a push. Liquid, of course, also has a push. I don't know, I probably talked to 2 or 3 different, people that want to do massive online learning platforms for the continent, because I think everyone realizes it's there. But what would be interesting as an application for web monetization would be if those courses can, of course, be monetized, right? So I'm Carl, I've got some knowledge to share. There should be some self-service way that I can do that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead.
I've had a couple of thoughts as I've listened to you talk, and also connecting back to what we were, the last slide, and then listening to the attorney that works for Wikipedia earlier, who was up here talking. So whenever you show that graph, that data with the others in 2050,
That apparently is a
I was
popular
like, how much of that is YouTube and how much of that is a learning platform or learning platforms? And I think that data connects back to what you just shared as far as the opportunity for, exporting out of Africa. There are some serious bridges that need to be built. There's eager people ready to work, and they're hungry for education around the things that are going to get them paid. And to talk up and to in regards to the communities, that I love that idea around partnership. It's going to take partnership, but also we have to remember that there's people that move around this continent and that continent specifically because they're eager to get to where the money is so they can go back into their communities, right? And take care of their people, take care of their villages and develop, et cetera. So we have to understand that there is a major journey here that is attached to any effort related to investing in the youth of Africa. It's a trickle effect, a domino effect. Education is gonna be a huge part of that. Yes, we have lots of platforms that free information is available. But I think that something that is a bit more specific around these skill sets would go a long way. The work that Snake Nation is doing in, 52 universities right now in the college societies, in the student societies, is major work. Those are the types of programs that people in this room should be partnering up with, so we can continue to make an even bigger splash and impact through the work that Snake Nation and similar companies are doing. But just connecting the dots here, like all of this is deeply connected and necessary. Yes, these are our comments, but this is also a call to action.
No, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And there's really interesting that this wound up being like one of the most popular slides in the deck. We haven't gotten there yet. All right, cool. So we're going to go to the next one here. And so we talked a little bit about the environment. So government has a significant push happening right now for one digital market, one continental free trade agreement. And so I'm just curious in terms of your thoughts around the players that are currently operating. Because obviously fintechs are blowing up on the continent. But as you can see, there's still obviously it's a big continent and lots of room to play. So just super curious around any other players in the space that you've been watching, that you find interesting, their approaches, things of that nature. So I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of talk about that, especially people that are focusing in this space of how do we ease the friction, as much as possible. So I'll open that up to the panel.
Okay, so I'm just going to try and lead this a little bit. I had some points around the web monetization stuff we're talking about, and I'm just going to try and tie it together with this. So I think this was right before COVID, 2019, 2020. Some stats were published for Econet and EcoCash, which is a telco from Zimbabwe with a mobile money service called EcoCash. And they had just over $80 billion in revenue over that particular financial period. And we found this to be very interesting, mostly because the nature of most of these payments are micropayments, right? This is not a big government entity pushing out payroll. This is people buying tomatoes on the street, maybe bill payments here and there, and what why this is relevant specifically for web monetization and what Interledger is kind of like allowed us to do is micropayments kind of like drive the economies, and it is very exciting to find technologies that kind of help push and are actually built around the nature of micropayments. What we are trying to do with our web monetization integrations, part of it is, well, okay, our platform, just run down, users have wallets, and all of the monetization, all of the earnings on the platform, they get awarded in a token that lives in their wallet. And when we talk about micropayments and what that can allow us to do is, so for example, if you're a user on our platform, we can reverse bill the data that you are spending on our platform and just charge you directly from your wallet, so you don't have to pay the telco, right? Opportunity right there. How are we doing that? That's exactly how telcos bill for mobile data, right? It's like micropayments in their nature, but in the form of the data that you bought from them. Every time you load a page, 20 kilobytes, 30 kilobytes, they subtract that from your account with them. And what we're just trying to do is, we pay the telcos upfront, and then we bill the users in our token, remove the first barrier of entry. And then, secondly, okay, well, now you don't have to worry about the data that you need to spend to watch whatever you're going to watch, right? Then another layer to it is like, well, we're not also going to assume that you are comfortable with just spending $9 or whatever you're making on online entertainment. We know you can just go to Facebook and scroll through. We know you can go to YouTube. How about we only bill you every time you watch an episode? So you have a subscription, you have access to all of this content. We're just going to bill you for the minutes or the seconds that you're going to watch. So when you come back from work and you open up the Snake Nation platform and you continue watching a series that you're watching from yesterday, we'll start billing you, from there, kind of move away from the whole subscription side of things. And we believe that this is a model that these users are already used to, from just the way they are already interacting with their telcos. Mm-hmm. This is the way that, this is how they're paying. I mean, most mobile plans are prepaid, so they're already used to, I have $1 and it's going to cost me 5 cents every minute. The telco is going to bill me as I do it. It's the same thing. I have $6 in my wallet. I want to watch this movie. This 1 hour, 30 minutes is going to cost me so much, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that, web monetization and the Interledger, quite frankly, is kind of like opened up for us. Advertising had kind of been sort of a dead model. In Africa, most specifically, not a lot of people are spending internet advertising in an area where there is no buying power. So the amount of advertising revenue that is going into the US, and what's coming into Southern Africa, for example, a fraction of it is going that side. So putting into context that whole conversation, I realized that saying $1 million in data is like $1 million is a lot of money. But $1 million is not a lot of money in the context of people who are spending tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing and just like trying to bring customers on board. I mean, when it's all said and done, there is going to still be a need, for this layer, this foundation of moving the money that works in all of these different fragmented territories. And we are trying to, of course, like any entrepreneur would do, we're trying to take over the whole space and kind of be that, de facto utility token that people are going to be using across all of these different services. But we do acknowledge that the work that everyone else is doing, we have no intention of reinventing the wheel. Recognizing all of the different partners and all of the different players in the ecosystem, the things that they are doing, what we're seeing from here, and trying to figure out ways to integrate and connect into them has kind of been our strategy around it. And with our token, in whatever blockchain or token is going to be living on. The Interledger is kind of like removed the need for us to kind of like stress too much around who's doing what, where they're doing it. It's kind of like now a check of, how is this coming back around to like, these payment pointers that we're going to be allocating to our users and piggy bank off that. Now, what's happening with Smart Africa and in PAPS, for example, is also very interesting from the perspective of when we think about other barriers of entries to just countries or nations in general. When we talk about a little bit, forgive me for saying this, when we talk about countries that are on the OFAC list, for example, Zimbabwe being one of them, these users that are in those countries are still experiencing the same financial problems that anyone else, anywhere else is experiencing. And we see, sort of like even this regional trade or just the ability or the existence of a frictionless foundation for payments, going across these regions, kind of like alleviating a lot of that because most of the stuff that we are consuming, most of the platforms that we are using are coming from across the sea. And when they come to Africa, and I'll point back to Zimbabwe again, this is a country that is also on the OFAC list. In as much as Interledger is going to be able to work there, as much as like all of these cryptocurrencies are going to be able to work there, when you get to the exchanges, when you get to whatever financial institutions are supposed to use to then like do the off-ramp from whatever that crypto is going to be to fiat, you are not going to be able to do so. And that has nothing to do with anything that you or your parents or anyone, quite frankly, that your fans, your producers, everyone you're working on, you're not involved in that. And it's a function of government policies and just the politics that is, quite frankly, in almost all of these countries at a certain level. So I also see this as an opportunity that is going to kind of alleviate some of the issues that come with that. So, if I can't access whatever service because I'm coming from a country that is on this particular list, well, at least now I can trade with, or at least now I can get subscribers to my content from users that are coming from, Ghana, or that are coming from, from South Africa or wherever, where, this particular restriction, is not going to be an issue. Yeah, and that's millions and millions of wallets. The way I look at it, there's a populations with millions and millions of people, and when you put those together, just from the impact that the lack of access that all of these individuals will have, that is all going to go away, with this regional, or at least a regionally accepted foundational frictionless payment system.
All right. Any other builds on that?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
So when I look at the players in this space, I kind of look at it in 3 levels. And the first level are the mobile networks. And the top 3 that come to mind are Safaricom with their M-Pesa solution that lets people to send payments via offline funds. And then there's Airtel, there's MTN. So that's the first layer. And then on top of that, we have companies that have built APIs that connect to web and mobile apps to the offline mobile networks, such that you can send a payment from an app to an offline phone directly. And on that layer, we have players like Cellulant, MFS, and all those other partners, API layers. And then on the other layer, we have folks like Chimoni. I'm going to plug Chimoni. So we have Chimoni, of course, that Chimoni has integrated with all of those people in the middle layer, such that you can go from crypto and Web3 directly to the offline stuff. And then from Snake Nation also, potentially to the Chimoni API, to like an offline mobile money wallet. And that's kind of where we want to be, where like we're connecting from any value to an offline user in maybe a rural part of the continent, so that user doesn't have to have internet on their phone, right? So they go from the Snake Nation token or from SRP Ledger or from Interledger through the Chimoni stuff, through the Chimoni API, and then Chimoni API already integrates with Cellulant, MFS, and all of those stuff. And then it goes to Airtel or M-Pesa or MTN. So I think that's where we want to be, where like any value or any earnings that someone has earned from the Snake Nation platform, like what you described, where people are watching videos or doing some work and earning some funds in the Snake Nation token, they could instantly cash that out regardless of where they are located without like needing to have a bank account. So that's the future I see in terms of payments on the continent. So enabling people to have utility of their funds regardless of where they are, regardless of what device they are using, regardless of what mobile network they are using, and bringing all of that to Interledger and making Interledger global.
No, I love that. And it's interesting because, you know, when you think, at least when I think about telcos, like in the States, Netflix doesn't need to be Verizon. Like it's a non-issue. But in Africa, you better have a data strategy, right? And so that's why when you talked about earlier about like how few users, and one of our friends was working in Universal Music, that's how we heard about how small like Apple Music was on the continent, for example, or Spotify is on the continent, is because of the data. So we're planning all this incredible like take over the world tech, but it's like if people can't use it because they can't, you know, access it because they don't have the data, then it's like this sort of hidden speed bump that I think we should just all be aware of. For us, the way we approach it, just for full transparency, is like we approach Liquid Telecom. We're like, hey, we want a reseller agreement. You know, we want a reseller agreement because we need to get that data at cost, right? So, you know, and then you can then help make sure that some of that value creation that happens on the platform can actually come to our users as data, right? And so that's another dynamic as well. So you know, there's lots of ways to kind of skin the cat, but just throwing it out there like that the data costs continue to be like a major roadblock too, which is interesting when you think about like how it actually prevents people in the case of web monetization from earning a living, you know, even as well. So there's probably some trade-off that can happen there if there's money being generated and data is a barrier. I think we're running tight on time, so we're gonna just end this with like, what are some of the tech trends we're seeing in culture? And I know we talked a bit about DAOs and NFTs, right? And why we're talking about these is because this is really where we saw creators like dig in, like call it pre-COVID. You know, you talk to a creator about NFTs and be like, what? And so, you know, people didn't really care, average people, not talking about the people in this room, but like users who are in the space that adopt, but don't necessarily understand blockchain and don't necessarily, you know, at that time didn't understand the use of NFTs. And so I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is a massive uptick in the use of NFTs and in DAOs as well. And we've seen it both from like community foundations developing DAOs for neighborhoods, down to, of course, creator collectives establishing DAOs and using NFTs. And so, Gabby, you had a really interesting use case for NFTs. We tried to implement last year, but we had an unwilling, short-sighted client. But I'd love maybe you to talk about some of the uses for NFTs that you're seeing, like even here in the city. You know?
Yeah, you know, earlier this year we had an opportunity. We were working with a cool client, and I was like, what if we just do NFT tickets? You know, and this was before Coachella dropped there. So I was so pumped when I saw Coachella drop their NFT ticket, because I see that as the future. As somebody who's a producer, I see that as, you know, I see that as now and the future, to have NFT collectibles and merchandise, and recently heard about digital NFTs as well. So as far as here in New Orleans, you know, you see the culture here. You see, you know the vibes. You know, New Orleans is a cool place, but New Orleans is very much so unbanked. There's a high poverty rate here, illiteracy, et cetera, but we have brilliant artists. We see that in these types of space, in these types of communities, right? Because we build art based off our experiences. And so as someone in this space, I'm very passionate, interested, and very much so in the weeds about minting NFTs on site at experiences, and also creating collectibles and things like that around things that people love and they spend money to go to. And so that's just one way you can utilize an NFT. But of course, there's tons of ways. There's music, there's art, there's minting the art while you're doing the art, and offering just like I said, the digital piece where it's physical. It's a physical but also digital component. I think that a lot of us saw NFTs based off of the apes and the this and the that, and building communities around that. But I think that there's a bigger opportunity to build community with NFTs around special interests, in organizing and allowing people the artists, going back to creatives in these communities like New Orleans, to make money forever, and for their families to make money forever. New Orleans is playing a big role, is really pushing festivals and everyone that comes here pretty much to figure out how to get the culture bearers involved in the things that you're doing. That's why you all saw that second line here yesterday, right? That's why you're seeing these different elements, because not only do we want to perform and entertain, but we want to monetize. And so this city has a special interest in seeing NFTs and Web3 really come to life here. We just had our very first local but national conference here around Web3 and NFTs, because we are slow adopters. We still have, until COVID, a lot of people were not even using a POS system that they should be using, collecting data at all. So I really commend New Orleans for pushing folks to not only help the culture bearers monetize their talents, but also just get up to speed, man. Get up to speed and just jump in and participate, and and improve the economy and lifestyle of those who we enjoy their works. So there's many ways that we can use NFTs.
And it's interesting that you touch upon that, because when I think about culture and like how culture drives tech adoption, right? And really, and that's why you see like Web3, like, the promise of Web3 is really the promise of the creative economy. And so it was really interesting to see like how they're taking NFTs in and I'm sure a totally different direction than they were originally intended, which was like, who would ever think that, this is now can replace ticketing. But, who would have thought that it would have taken COVID to drive QR code adoption, for example, right? So some of this is like, how do you be flexible? Because it was like, everybody's like, QR codes is like, from a marketing standpoint, a couple of years ago, I was like, fuck, QR code, why would you do that? But now it's like, you don't even have to tell people what to do to use QR codes. So just an example of like how like these external factors influence, the adoption of technology. Like no one could predict, except maybe unless you're Bill Gates, that, COVID was coming, right? That's another story. Okay. So, but what's interesting, when you hear about, so let's kind of take it a step further around NFTs, and you start to talk about metaverse real estate, and how you have all of these different, problems occurring of like gas fees and things like that. So that's why I think what Interledger is doing is super interesting. When you start to get into this lane of like, now we're going to extend NFTs into now saying, I want to buy a piece of real estate in your metaverse. What does that look like? And you're seeing a lot of players enter that space as well. So Diddy, Snoop, all of these guys are now starting to be like, oh yeah, I'll make an appearance in Fortnite. I'll make an appearance here and there. And so it's very interesting. Like Travis Scott did a Fortnite concert, for example. So just as, this is where that adoption happens. And so they're finding audiences wherever they are, whether or not they're in person or online. Like if you could say, simple math is, hey, if I could do a concert for 1 million people, that's great, right? And so that's how the artists are now looking at these technologies, which a couple of years ago didn't mean anything to them because they weren't, driving any value for them, And so just a long arc on the adoption. So I think we're gonna
I just want to comment real quick on that.
Sure.
You know, I put on my Oculus a couple months ago, and I was in the metaverse. I was just like poking around and stuff. And Big Frida, who's a huge artist from here,
Speak on
is performing in the metaverse.
There you go.
It just didn't get a notification about it. Didn't know it was happening. So when we talk about culture bearers and we talk about, you know, Interledger and we talk about just opportunity, like I think that the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
You know? And it's good to see that there is adoption, it's slow adoption, but we all have a role to play to educate people around us about it and to support it.
Yeah, I did not know that the Big Frida was in the metaverse.
I was like, what?
So does everybody know who Big Frida is? So would you please educate us?
Big Frida is a bounce artist from New Orleans. Big Frida has their own shows and on like Bravo and in a few other platforms, but definitely the sound that you heard on Beyonce's latest album, you know, Break My Soul and the backdrop, that is New Orleans. That's New Orleans music in the backdrop of that song, you know, so I would say the internet, then, you know, Web3, and then, you know, NFTs will do big things for artists and creatives. I mean, and Big Frida is proof of that.
Copy. Okay, cool.